Okay, now we'll hear from Doug Folsom talking about back safety and how to protect our aching back.
I think if I were to ask any of you that are listening this morning, if you have in the last week or last month had any kind of backache at all, I'd say probably at least half of you or more would probably raise your hand. This is something that's really common. We deal with it a lot. It's a very important part of our body. Our spine not only carries the load of our body and the load that we put on our body, but it also houses our nervous system. That every function of our body is controlled through our spinal cord and through our nervous system, and that comes through our spine at different levels of our spine all the way down. And so taking care of our back becomes extremely important, not just because it can be painful, but because, every aspect of our health, goes through or interacts with our brain through our spine. So it's extremely important that we take care of it. A back injury can be, minor but painful, or it can be major and debilitating. Even, it could even be potentially fatal. And so it's something that we should all really understand. If there's that part of our body that's that important to us, we should have a pretty good understanding of it. If we look at our spine, it's made up of vertebra. It's made up of discs that are like bushings or pads in between each of the vertebra. And then inside the spine, we have our spinal cord that goes down with nerves that exit at each level. In this picture, you can kind of see in the bigger picture, there's these blue things coming out there that are representative of the nerves. Now, those nerves, if they get impinged in there because, a disc slips because you've got a disc that's, herniated, bulging, is coming into contact with that nerve, that can be really painful, and it can also affect the function of that nerve and whatever body function that nerve is going to. So this is something we really want to take care of. Things that kind of contribute to having back injuries are lack of fitness. That's a real big one. Because we need to be ready, our body needs to be able to support our spine when we put a heavy load on our spine. And, and our bodies in and of themselves are a heavy load on our spine. I had a friend over the weekend that was telling me that he'd hurt his back, and he's not the most fit person. And regardless of whether he was more fit than he is, it's very possible he still could hurt his back. But it was interesting. I asked him about it. He said he'd gone to the hardware store. He bought a bag of playground sand. He was doing something in the backyard. He needed this sand. It was a 75-pound bag of sand. He said he went to the store. He picked up that bag of sand, got it in the cart, took it to the register and paid for it, got it out to his vehicle, picked the bag up, out of the cart, got it into his vehicle, still no problem. He drives home. He gets home. He takes that bag of sand, picks it up, gets it out of his vehicle. He sets it down on the ground by the vehicle, and he goes and he does a couple things, and he comes back, as soon as he brings some other things inside, and he picks up this bag of sand one more time off the ground to carry it to the backyard. And this time, he gets that, ache, that twinge in his back, and he knows he's done something. He hurt his back. Well, he lifted that same bag of sand 3 times before. Was he not able to lift that bag of sand? Obviously the first, second, third time he was able to do that without any consequences. Often what happens is it's, fatigue. Maybe you do have the strength and the stamina for those first 3 lifts, but then that muscle starts to get tired. Maybe there was something different about his last lift. Maybe going down to the ground to pick it up off the ground could have been a huge contributing factor as well. But your fitness level in several different ways is a significant contributing factor to your susceptibility to back injuries. Both the strength of your core muscles that support your spine, as well as just your overall wellness. If you're sick, if you got a cold, if you're tired, that could impact how well you're hydrated, how well your circulatory system is working, are all factors Also being prepared to work, and that kind of comes into your circulatory system a bit. If you're warmed up and your blood's flowing, getting that blood flowing well to your muscles and to all parts of your body are important to help those muscles not get injured due to strain. And so circulation is important, warming up, getting, your heart rate up a little bit and getting some physical activity going before you start doing strenuous lifting, pushing, pulling, things like that, but also being well hydrated can impact that as well. So those are important things with your preparation to work that are important to remember. Getting warmed up first and being hydrated and being healthy. Our age becomes a factor. Our spine is a part of our body that tends to wear over time. And so the older we get, maybe the more susceptible we are to these injuries. But that's not to say that a young person, can't hurt their back either. In fact, I think for most of us, the majority of our problem with our backs is, how we used them when we were young. When we were young and indestructible, we probably, weren't as good as we should have been about taking care of our back, being conscientious of how we used it, our fitness levels, and so forth. And so as we age, there's different factors that can come into play. Gender can be a factor where, some people may be more susceptible than others. There's other factors like that could just be genetic. If you're prone to degenerative disc disease, for example, that could be a factor. So sometimes it may not even be anything that you do wrong, that can contribute to these factors. But obviously, taking care of ourselves is very important. And that begins from when we're very young. We need to be aware of this and doing our best not to abuse our back. If we look at back injuries, there's 4 different stages or severity that we may see in a back injury. The first one is just, being tired. Those muscles, when you start using them, when they start to get worked, to the point where they start getting tired, at that point they become more susceptible to a sprain or strain. And so listening to your body, and if you feel, muscle fatigue, especially in your lower back or, anywhere in your back, that's really important to pay attention to that, because your body's telling you that, it's getting towards the edge of its ability to safely be able to function with regard to whatever you've been doing. So listen to your body. That fatigue is that first step, that first stage toward a back injury. Then it may go from just fatigue to outright discomfort. I know probably a lot of you have an ache in your back, probably in your lower back, or maybe in your neck up between your shoulder blades. And that ache is always there, or maybe it's there frequently, it's there a lot. That pain, that discomfort is telling you something. It could be something to do with your work and how you're doing your work. It could be something about your posture. Posture is extremely important to spine health. And so, if you have some chronic or some reoccurring pain or discomfort in your back especially, but it could be other parts of your body too, it's really important to listen to that, try to determine what's causing it. Talk to your doctor if you need to, but that's really important. Pain that is associated with a spinal injury, something with your back, could be felt in your extremities, because of course, if a nerve is being impinged, if it's a nerve in your lower back, you could be having pain in your hip and your thigh, all the way down to your big toe. You could be having pain where the injury is actually in your back, not your leg. The same thing with your shoulders and your arms and your fingers. You could have certain pain, or it could be other neurological type symptoms such as tingling, numbness, burning sensations. That could be indicative of something going on, at one of your levels in your spine. And so it's really important to pay attention to that discomfort and that pain when it occurs. Obviously, when we get past just, something that's really painful, there is the potential for disability, for not being able to use a part of your body or not being able to use it to its full capability. The first time I had a serious back injury, I had what they called a drop foot on my left leg. In other words, about half the muscles in my left leg were paralyzed. They weren't working. And that was a situation where for years I had been ignoring this nagging ache in my lower back, and didn't really figure out what it was I was doing or what was going on to be aware that I needed to be more careful with my back. And then eventually I had a serious injury. And you do not want to get to that stage where all of a sudden part of your body doesn't work anymore, or a function of your body doesn't work anymore. You could lose the ability to control your bowels, for example. That's a function I want to maintain. And and it's important to maintain the health of your back to do that. And unfortunately, when it comes to these really disabling injuries, we don't really know until it happens. There's no way to say, oh yeah, if I do a little bit more, I may lose control of my bowels, or I may get a paralyzed, leg. That usually just jumps on you all of a sudden. So it's really important. Listen to the fatigue, listen to the discomfort, and figure out what's going on with your body, and determine ahead of time, the things that you need to do or that you need to change to improve your spinal health. Things that will cause injuries, of course, are loading the spine. Force and repetitive motions can be very damaging to your musculoskeletal system. So where you're pushing, pulling, lifting things, those are going to put a lot of strain on your back. And those are things we need to be careful about. If you have the ability to adjust these tasks to reduce the weight, to reduce the force, to reduce the number of repetitions, or to even reduce the need to perform a lift or a push or a pull with your body, then that is all the better for your long-term spinal health. And so those are things that we should look at. We should be finding ways to use mechanical assist, in lifting and moving and transferring, heavy objects especially, or reducing the number of repetitive motions. We can be better prepared to be able to handle those with good fitness and good health, but in the long run, no matter how fit you are, you can wear out the discs and have other injuries associated with your bones and with your spine, with your ligaments, and so forth. So it's important to take care of yourself and listen to your body. Awkward static postures where you're not moving at all can be very difficult, and sometimes you'll notice if you've had to hold a static position for a long time that when you go to move, it hurts. That's your body telling you that static position wasn't too good for you. Sometimes it could be, happen to be in an awkward position where you're out of a good posture, you're out of your neutral posture and having to maintain that awkward position. And that can become painful, especially when it's time to release and move again. And so those are good warning signs that activity should be something that you need to adjust or change or try to avoid. Contact stress can also be a factor in musculoskeletal injuries, ergonomics, tools, having a tool that fits you well, to reduce that contact stress, to make it more comfortable on your body. And that's another thing that's important to think about and remember. The thing that to me over the years is I've had, some serious injuries, and I've had a couple of spinal surgeries that I've learned I don't really have the kind of pain that I used to have. And in my injuries where I hurt my back, don't happen as often as they used to, because I have really been able to learn how to listen to my body. I've had enough of these experiences that when I feel, a certain level of fatigue in certain muscles, I know it's time to back off and stop. And if you haven't been there and you haven't experienced that yet, then, maybe you can just kind of learn from my experience a bit that you need to listen to your body. But one thing that's really meant a lot to me is understanding the posture and the curve of your spine. If you look at this picture here, this representation, you can see that in the neck you have this outward curve in the spine up here in the neck, and then it curves inward in the thoracic region here behind your shoulder blades. And then in your lower back, there's a slight inward curve again. And that curve of your spine is actually enables you to carry the loads that you do and for your spine to be able to support the stress. However, sometimes we change the direction of those curves and load our body up with those curves in an outward where it should be an inward curve. That's going to be difficult on your discs and on your spine. Sometimes we exaggerate the existing curve, where we'll take that curve like in your lower back. If you got a big belly and it pulls your lumbar spine forward, it is an inward curve there, but it will exaggerate it beyond what is the natural or neutral posture for your spine. So learning to work and learning to walk and do everything that you do with good posture to maintain a natural neutral posture, for me, has been one of the most important things in being able to avoid pain in my back and even some of those injuries that I've had as a result. It's also important to understand the health of the disc in between your vertebra is important. Sometimes with age, we'll get some arthritic conditions that can be very hard on the disc, and those are natural conditions that will develop over time. It's important to try and keep ourselves as healthy as possible to delay that. Also, you can have a natural deterioration of the disc, or like I said, some people are genetically predisposed to degeneration of discs, which will mean your discs will get thinner and start to disappear, and then they're not performing their function, and then you're more likely to have impingement on those nerves. And so if you suffer from that condition, it becomes extremely important to make sure that you are using good posture and taking care of your back and not abusing it. If you are exaggerating the curve of your back, or if you're lifting with your spine out of that neutral posture, that neutral position, then you put uneven pressure on the discs, and you can see in these representations some bulging disc or herniated discs. And when this person bends forward and then lifts and loads their spine, bending at the waist, they put a lot of pressure on the front of that disc, and it squeezes the softer inner material on the disc towards the back. Eventually, the harder outer material on the back of that disc will get weaker and can start to bulge out or even rupture. And so in that, in large part, it can be natural degeneration, but it can also is significantly contributed by loading those discs unevenly, so that pressure, squeezes to one side of the disc or the other. So it's important to try and keep that spine straight when you're loading as much as possible. When you're lifting, loading, when you're pushing, pulling, even when you're just sitting and working at a desk, because your body has a significant weight and stress on your spine by itself, to make sure that we maintain that good posture. A lot of times we talk about proper lifting techniques, and so here's a good demonstration of what that looks like, where you get down close to the object you're picking up, you keep it close to your body, close to your center of balance, to your center line, and then you use your legs to do the lifting. You bend your knees and you lift with your legs, and you try to keep that back as straight as possible. Even if it needs to go forward a little bit to grab the object you're lifting, you want to get that back straight and vertical as soon as possible, and keep it that way. But know your limits. I mean, there's a lot of different ways we can lift. You can use a bridging technique, where you can actually put your hand on a surface while you're lifting with the other hand, and you can help distribute the weight that you're lifting, or that extra force on your body, using a bridging technique. So there's more than one way to lift and not hurt yourself. But the most important thing is to kind of understand your body, to know your limits, and to listen to your body when it tells you you're getting, close to those limits. It's really important also to understand that when you do it wrong, when you bend over at the waist, you put an extreme amount of force on your spine, especially on the lower part of your spine. As you lift, you're generally lifting with your hands and your arms, and so they're attached at your shoulders, which are up here at the top of your spine. If I put a lot of weight up there and I bend over at my waist, as that weight transfers down my spine, it increases the force on my spine. And so the ratio of weight to force at the fulcrum point, or at the waist of your spine, is about 10 to 1. So if you just flat out bend over at the waist and not with your knees or anything, you can have 100 pounds of weight, which could just be the weight of your torso, putting about 1,000 pounds of pressure on your lumbar region on your spine. You don't want to do that. Your spine can't do that over and over and over. If you're picking up a 50 or 100 pound object while you're doing that, now you're talking about 1,500, 2,000 pounds of pressure that you're putting on your spine. And again, no matter how fit you are, you can't do that over and over without causing some damage and some wear and tear, and injuries, will probably happen. So it's really important to try and think about that posture and recognize those leverage principles when you're carrying weight. Keep it close to the center. That will minimize the force on your spine. The farther away that you go, the more with weight, the more pressure that you put on your spine. As you bend at the waist, the farther you go from that center point of the fulcrum there at your waist, the more pressure you're going to put on your spine. So just think about using your knees and keeping the loads as close to you as possible to reduce that force that you put on your body. You could pick up a chair in the office right now, and if you pick up the back of the chair and just hold it really close to yourself as you pick it up, it's pretty easy to pick up. If you try to do that with your arms straight out, you'll be able to tell that it's, 2, 3, 4 times heavier, when you're picking it up with your arms out straight away from your center. So remember those principles. Keep it close. We want to make sure that you maintain those neutral posture curves in your spine. Don't get your spine out of its natural posture too far, and keep it in that neutral posture as much as possible. Use the bridging technique I mentioned, where if you're lifting with one hand, use the other hand to put some weight on a nearby surface to help transfer some of that force to another surface besides your body. Move your feet, never twist at your waist. That's really important. You put a lot of stress, on those discs, especially when you twist a little bit. It's almost like a grinding motion, a slight little grinding motion, in between two vertebrae with those discs in there, and you're much more likely to cause some damage to that disc and your back when you twist at the waist. So, and whether you're loaded or not, try to avoid that twisting. But especially if you're carrying something, make sure you rotate with your feet and not by twisting at the waist, because that can do a lot of harm. My first really serious back injury, resulted from just a slight twist, while I was loaded. And that's all it took to cause some real severe damage to one of my discs. It's also a good thing to remember that there is something we call the power position. You want to have that good straight posture, and you want to keep your arms, close to your body. And if I can be lifting things so that it's in this area here between my waist and my shoulders and close to my body, that's going to put a lot less stress, even between my knees and my shoulders as a lifting range, and keep it close to my body. That's the power position. And if we can do most of our lifting in between our knees and our shoulders, that's going to be a lot less stress on our back than when we have to go all the way down to the ground, or when we reach way above our head with our arms extended. Because again, leverage principles. The farther my arms go out away from my spine, the more pressure that puts on my spine. So if I'm reaching up high to a high shelf, putting things away up over my head, I'm much more likely to get injured at that moment than when I'm working in the power position, when I'm working close to my torso, in between my waist and my shoulders, ideally, but in between my knees and my shoulders, is a safer range to be in. Look at your workspace. Look at the things you have to pick up and move. Is there a way that we can store them up off the ground a little bit if we need to pick them up frequently, so that we're not going all the way to the ground to do every lift, so that we can be in that power position when we're picking things up? Can we limit the number of lifts that we have to do? Can we limit the force? Lots of times, it's not uncommon for us to see, like my friend picking up the 75-pound bag of sand. That's too much. As a general rule, if we're lifting things, we should probably limit that to 50 pounds or less, that someone would lift by themselves. And that depends on that person's physical condition. But if we're talking 60, 70, 90 pounds, especially repeated lifts, then we're really much more likely to get injured in those situations. And we need to make sure that we are finding different ways to move that material rather than with our body. Our body is a tool that we can't afford to wear out. Let's use other tools and use them. We can avoid injury by, again, our fitness, especially, toning and having, concentrating on the fitness of our core muscles around our center. That helps support our spine a lot, especially your lower back. It's very important to have healthy, fit core muscles to support your back if you're doing lifting and manual work as a regular part of your job. But also preparing for work by being hydrated, and like we mentioned already, getting your blood moving, warming up before you start doing that heavy work is going to help your body prepare for what's coming, get good circulation going to your muscles, and will make you less likely to have one of those strain injuries. Using the proper tool for the job. Often a tool that isn't the right tool for the job, even though it gets the job done, may force us into an awkward posture while we're using it. So finding tools that fit the job so that our body can be in a good posture while we're using it is very important. This picture is a good example where this truck is jacked up off the ground a little bit, and this mechanic is removing the wheel. He's got a big, heavy 1-inch pneumatic, ratcheting gun he's using to take the lug nuts off. But as he does that, the spinning force of the air gun there turns the wheel. So he sticks his foot out there to kind of stop the wheel from rotating. And now he's in a really awkward posture with his leg out there, mostly supported just on one leg behind him, and then his back is bent over. And, he's probably going to get hurt like this eventually. If you could take a wheel chock and stick it under that wheel to keep it from spinning instead of getting yourself in this awkward position, then you could drop down to one knee, or maybe you can lift the truck high enough that you don't have to bend over. Either way, get yourself in a position where you can have your back up straight while you're doing that job. And so there's lots of examples of different kinds of tools where the tool may force us into an awkward position because we're not using the right tool to fit, our body and the job at the same time. And it's okay to get help. If you're having a hard time, if you think that the work you're doing is creating, undue stress, and you're not able to do it in a safe manner, then talk to somebody. What tools and equipment can we get? Can we get other people to help? Do a team lift, for example. Again, if we're regularly lifting things that are heavier than 50 pounds, we should, have a plan for doing team lifts on those. When we do a team lift, we want to make sure that we're working together, that we're communicating, that we're going in the same direction, that we're keeping that weight evenly distributed between us as we lift and as we set it down, so that we don't suddenly transfer, an uneven amount of load to our partner. But most importantly, and the best solution, of course, is to find mechanical assist, to find tools that can do that lifting for us and moving for us, rather than always doing it with our body. But again, other adjustments, reducing the amount of the weight, reducing the frequency of the lifts. There are ways to repackage our materials, for example, that may allow us to use a forklift instead, or that may, lighten the load or put better handles on it so that it's easier to carry. There's lots of things we can look at. Just because something is the way it is doesn't mean it has to stay that way. And if it's creating discomfort for us, then we should find a solution. Your mom was right. Posture is very important. Good posture, your shoulders need to be back. Your chin needs to be up so that your head is above your shoulders, not hanging out in front of your shoulders. And you want to be able to hold in. You want to hold in that gut a little bit so you can rotate your pelvis forward a little bit. And that way, you can keep that curve in your lower back from getting over exaggerated like we see on the left side here, where, he's got a little bit of a belly, it's hanging out there and is pulling that lower part of his back out. Again, that's going to contribute to a lot of ache there in that lower part of your back if you do that repeatedly for long periods of time. So think about your posture. It really does put you at risk when you're not in good posture. When you're seated and you have to work in a chair, you need to be able to adjust your chair height and the height of your working surface and your keyboards or phones or other things that you're working with to get them so that you can maintain a good posture while you're doing that work, instead of hunching over the workstation like we see, in this picture. And so there's lots of adjustments that we can think about. What's the height of your monitor? What's the height of your desktop? What's your seat height? All of those things will help you establish a workstation that fits your body so that you can maintain good posture while you're working. So just in summary, it's really important to take care of your back. I'm pretty sure that just about everyone out there have had some sort of aches or pains before, even if you haven't had a serious back injury. Those pains are all telling you something. I want you to please listen to your body. Understand how your posture is factoring into your work and your aches and pains. I think, frequently, if you have pain between your shoulder blades and if you push your shoulders back, you may find that gives you some relief, but it may be difficult for you to hold your shoulders back like that because you're not accustomed to it. We really need to work on having that good posture. It can help to increase your fitness level, especially your core muscles. Make sure you remember to get your blood moving before you do strenuous activity. Warm up first and be well hydrated so that you get good circulation of your blood as you're doing that physical work. Think about proper lifting techniques, specifically, regardless of whether you do it in the picture perfect bend with your knees, lift with your legs, not your back scenario. But think about, am I supporting my spine? Am I using a bridge? Am I keeping my posture in a good neutral position while I'm lifting this object, or while I'm pushing or pulling or carrying this object? And if it's not working out, don't be afraid to ask for help. We all need help, and it's important, if the work is too heavy, that we don't hurt ourselves, to get that done. Be willing to tell someone or ask someone for help, or look at the processes in your workspace and make sure that if we see things that we're currently doing that are kind of forcing people to do too much or do it in an awkward manner, we need to find a way to make some adjustments to that so that we can maintain, that most important tool that we have, which is our body, and our spine. When that wears out, it's wore out. We can't go buy a new one. So let's make sure we take care of it. So, do we have any questions, Jason?
Folks, if you've got any questions, please type those into your chat box or into the Q&A box, and we'll answer those now. I don't have any questions in right now, but I'll ask you the question I did this morning. If you had one thing that our viewers could do today, right now, what would it be that could help their back health for the rest of their life?
The first thing I want you all to do right now, as we're ending, is I want you to do a self-assessment. Do I have any aches and pains? Where are those aches and pains? How's my posture? Do I keep my shoulders back? Do I keep my head above my shoulders? Am I slouching at the waist? Am I hunching over? And I think you might find that a lot of the aches and pains you may be having may be associated with some posture issues. So think about, how you're feeling, where you're having some pain, what your posture is, or what activities you're engaging in that are contributing, making those pains worse. If you need to, go talk to your doctor, but make sure you listen to your body and start right now by just doing kind of a self-evaluation and take a self-inventory, how your body feels and how your work impacts your body throughout the day, and focus on that posture. I think that's one of the most important things we can do, is concentrate on having good posture while we're working. And some people, also it can help to think about the rule of opposites. If I'm doing the same thing in one direction for a long time, let's change it up and think about doing it in the opposite direction, changing the force so that we're not always putting the same force on our body in the same direction at the same time all the time. Find ways to reverse, that force that you're continually putting on your body. You think about some light stretching activities where, if I'm gripping something a lot, maybe it really kind of helps to stretch my hand open a little bit to help that blood flow into my hand, keep those muscles loose. And you can do that with other parts of your body too. But most importantly, listen to your body, take an inventory, be aware of how you're using it and how your posture is maintained while you're doing your work throughout the day.
Great, Doug. Thank you. I have a question. It's more of a statement, but I'll ask it as a question. What do you think about stand-up workstations?
Stand-up workstations can be really good. Look, sitting is hard on your body. One of the most important things that you do is to move, to change your position. If you're in the same position all day long, even if it's good posture, it's going to cause fatigue on your body. So it's really important to be able to change it up. And whether that's to get away from your desk and walk around a little bit, take a break and walk around, or whether it's, raising that stand-sit workstation and work standing up for a while. I think they're great. I think that, it's something that you need to evaluate for yourself and works best for you, because in the end, whether it fits your body, just because the other person works for the other person's body, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for your body. We're all different. The anthropometrics, the measurements of each section, each part of our body is all different. And so the adjustments to our workstation all need to be different so that they fit our bodies. But sit-stand workstations are a great way to get yourself out of just standing or being in the same position all day long, which does put a lot of stress on you.
All right. Thank you, Doug. I just an observation from this morning. as we were setting up, I use my laptop screen as my major screen when I'm doing this, because that's where the webcam is. And so this morning, what's that?
And it's lower, right? So
and it's lower, and without thinking, I grabbed something. It's on a little stand, but it wasn't quite high enough, and I found myself slouching there. And I actually, I don't know if I was listening directly to what you were saying, but I found something in my desk and propped it up just a little bit more, so it's a couple inches higher, and makes a noticeable difference. So do something now. Change something about your workstation. Change something about your posture. We can listen to all the training in the world, and Doug did a great job giving us lots of things to think about. But unless we actually do something, we're still going to be walking around with that aching back or neck or whatever it may be. So good job, Doug. Thank you very much. Appreciate everybody's attendance here. We've gone a little bit long today, so we're going to have a quick turnaround to the next webinar. We'll be coming back starting at 10 o'clock with the carrot and the stick. So if you haven't signed up for that, I did have one person send me an email. Send me an email, and I'll get you a link for that right now. Thanks, Doug. Last word?
Have a safe day. Think about it. Go evaluate yourself. See how you're feeling. Listen to your body and do something about it. Don't just ignore it.
Awesome. Thanks, Doug. Have a great day, everybody.